Ever found yourself puzzled over the terms Fob and CIF? Like there's some kind of secret code that everyone but you seems to understand? Well, there's no need to feel left out any longer. Today, we'll unravel these industry terms and shed light on their differences, advantages, and disadvantages. First things first, what do these terms mean? FOB, or freight on board, is a trading term that refers to the point at which a seller's obligation to deliver goods ends, and the buyer's obligation to pay for and transport those goods begins. This point is when the goods are on board the ship. Now, let's move to CIF, which stands for cost, insurance, and freight. This term means that the seller pays for the cost, insurance, and freight to transport the goods to a destination selected by the buyer. When the goods arrive at the port of destination, the buyer becomes responsible for them. Now that we've defined these terms, let's look at how they play out in real life. Imagine a petroleum trader in Houston selling crude oil to a buyer in Singapore. If the deal is made on FOB terms, the seller's responsibility ends once the crude oil is on the ship in Houston. The buyer then takes responsibility for the transportation, insurance, and other costs to get the oil to Singapore. On the other hand, if the deal is on CIF terms, the seller in Houston is responsible for getting the crude oil all the way to Singapore, including insurance and freight costs. Once the oil arrives in Singapore, the buyer takes over. Now, let's discuss the advantages and disadvantages of both terms. FOB offers the buyer more control over the shipping process. They can choose their carrier, negotiate freight rates, and manage the risk of loss or damage. However, this also means more work and responsibility for the buyer. On the flip side, CIF minimizes the buyer's responsibility in the shipping process. The seller takes care of all the details until the goods arrive at the destination port. But this also means the buyer has less control over the shipping process and may end up paying for inflated freight and insurance costs. In conclusion, whether to use FOB or CIF depends on the specific needs and capacities of the seller and buyer. If the buyer wants more control and is willing to take on more responsibility, FOB might be the better choice. However, if the buyer prefers to minimize their involvement in the shipping process and is willing to potentially pay a bit more, CIF could be the way to go. Remember, FOB and CIF are just two of the many international commercial terms used in international trade. Understanding these terms can help you navigate the complex world of global trade and make informed decisions. So next time you come across FOB or CIF, you'll know exactly what they mean and how to use them to your advantage.